Welcome to the world of sci-fi story, and don't forget the like and subscribe the channel. Her fate was sealed before birth. Now she must face her human betrothed. The chosen one's burdened princess, Lyra, stood in the grand hall of the Velmar Palace, her heart pounding before her. A massive holographic screen flickered to life. A face appeared of a human man. His sharp eyes stared ahead, his strong jaws set in determination. He was the man she was promised to before she was even born. Her fate had been sealed long ago. The hall was silent, filled only with the soft hum of technology. The Velmar High Council sat on their thrones watching her. Their long robes shimmered under the glowing blue lights. Princess Tyra, the Supreme Elder, spoke, his voice deep and emotionless. Tomorrow, the human arrives. You will meet him, you will obey him, you will fulfill the treaty. Sarah clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms. She had known this day would come all her life. She had been trained for this moment. Obedience, submission, duty. These words had been drilled into her mind since childhood, but deep inside she hated them. Humans were dangerous, that's what they told her. They were stronger than any other species, warriors of unmatched power. And now she was to be given to one. She had no choice. That night, Tyra lay awake in her chamber. The soft glow of the twin moons shone through the tall window, casting silver light across the floor. She stared at the ceiling, her mind racing. Who was this human? Was he cruel? Would he treat her like a prisoner? She had heard stories. Humans fought like monsters, their rage unmatched. They conquered planets, defeated empires, and yet they had never taken Velmar by force. They had only demanded a bride. Her a knock at the door startled her. It was her closest advisor, Elder Varys, a wise old Velmar with kind eyes. You do not sleep, Varys said softly. How can I? Tyra whispered. Tomorrow I meet my fate. Varys sighed, stepping closer. It is not fate, child, it is survival. The humans protect us in exchange for this alliance. If you refuse. Zur sat up, her voice sharp. If I refuse, what? They will destroy us. Varys hesitated, then lowered his gaze. No, the humans do not conquer without cause, but the council fears them, and what the council fears they control. Zira frowned. There was something in his tone, something unspoken. What are you not telling me? She asked. Varys hesitated, then shook his head. Sleep, princess. Tomorrow everything changes. With that he left, the door sliding shut behind him. Zira lay back down, but she did not sleep. The next morning the palace buzzed with activity. Guards stood in formation, and nobles whispered among themselves. The human ship had arrived. Zeta stood at the entrance, her hands hidden inside the long sleeves of her ceremonial robe. Her heart pounded as the ship's ramp lowered, hissing with steam. Then he stepped out. Commander Leon Carter. He was nothing like she expected, tall, broad-shouldered, and wearing dark armor that gleamed under the sun. His sharp blue eyes scanned the area, his expression unreadable. His presence was commanding, powerful. Zara forced herself to stand still as he approached. The guards tensed. The nobles held their breath. Leon stopped just a few steps away from her. For a long moment neither spoke. Then his gaze locked onto hers, and his lips curved slightly. You don't look like a slave, he said. You look like a fighter. Cyrus stiffened. A fighter? No one had ever called her that. She was trained to be obedient, quiet, controlled. But this human, her betrothed, saw something else in her. She didn't know if that was a blessing or a warning. The wind howled around them, carrying the weight of a future neither of them had chosen. And in that moment, Cra knew this was only the beginning. The hum test. Syra had spent her whole life being told that humans were dangerous, unpredictable, and ruthless. Yet as she stood before Commander Leon Carter, she felt something else entirely. Unsettled, not by fear, but by the strange way he looked at her, like he was studying her, measuring her worth. His words from before echoed in her mind. You don't look like a slave, you look like a fighter. No one had ever called her that. The air between them was thick with tension. The Supreme Elder of Velmar, along with the council, sat watching. Every noble in the palace held their breath, waiting for Leon to claim her as his bride, his property, his conquest. But he did not. Instead, Leon folded his arms across his broad chest and spoke words that shattered every expectation. You will prove yourself to me. Murmurs erupted in the hall. The Supreme Elder's eyes narrowed, his voice sharp. What do You mean human. The treaty states that you will take the princess as your bride. She is prepared. She is yours. Leon did not take his eyes off Cra. A warrior does not accept what is given without question. I don't take weaklings into my ranks. If she is to stand beside me, she must earn that place. Tara felt her breath catch. This was unexpected. No human had ever done this before. The treaty was clear. The Velmar gave their chosen one to a human without question. It was a rule, an agreement that had lasted for decades. Why was he refusing her? Why was he testing her? You insult the princess, one of the council members growled. She is royalty, not a soldier. Leon's expression did not change then. She will fail. His words hit Zyra like a strike to the chest. He expected her to fail. She clenched her fists, heat rising inside her. She had spent her entire life being told what she was: a symbol, a bride, a sacrifice for peace. But now, for the first time, someone was telling her that she had to be more. A strange feeling burned inside her, not anger, not fear, determination. Very well, the Supreme Elder said, though his tone was tight with displeasure. What are your terms, human? Leon finally looked away from Syra, turning to the council. 3 tests: strength, intelligence, courage. She passes. She stands beside me as an equal. She fails. He paused, his gaze sharp. She stays here. A hush fell over the crowd. Syra's stomach twisted. If she failed, she would never leave Valmeri. The council whispered among themselves, but the Supreme Elder gave a slow nod. We accept. Leon turned back to Exidu. His voice was steady, but his eyes held something deeper, a challenge. This was her chance. F lifted her chin, her voice steady. I accept. A flicker of something passed through Leon's expression, approval. But he did not smile. Instead, he simply said, then let's begin. Test 1. The warriors trial. Thyra had never fought in real combat before. She had trained in theory, in choreographed battle sequences, learning how to move with grace, but never with true intent. Lon had no patience for grace. The first test was combat against a Velmar war construct, a massive robotic training machine designed to simulate real battle conditions. It stood 10 feet tall, its metal limbs sleek and deadly, its energy blade humming with power. Your task is simple, Leon said, standing off to the side, arms folded. Defeat the Zira. Swallowed hard. The nobles watched from the upper level, murmuring among themselves. The Supreme Elder looked on in silence. The construct's eyes flashed red. Then it attacked. Zura barely had time to dodge as a metal fist slammed into the ground where she had stood a second ago. The floor cracked under the impact. Her heart pounded. This was nothing like training. The machine was too fast, too strong. It did not wait for her to move in rehearsed step. It hunted her. She spun, trying to find an opening, but the construct swung its energy blade in a deadly arc. Zira ducked, feeling the heat slice just above her head. Too slow, too weak. Leon's voice echoed from the side. If you hesitate, you die. Zira gritted her teeth. I will not die. She needed to think, to adapt. The machine was big, powerful, but it wasn't alive. It had a pattern. She just had to find it. The construct lunged again, and this time Vyra moved with purpose. She sidestepped at the last second, making the machine overcome it to its attack. A small opening appeared without thinking. She lunged forward, striking the machine's joint with her energy dagger. Sparks flew. The construct staggered. The crowd gasped. Leon's expression remained unreliable, but he gave a small nod. Better. But the fight wasn't over. The construct recovered its damaged limb, moving slower but still deadly. It changed tactics, launching a projectile from its wrist. His aura barely dodged as an energy blast scorched the ground beside her. She had to finish this. She remembered what Varys had once told her about machines. They rely on commands, corrupt the command, and you win. She looked up there on its back, a control node, her only chance. The machine charged again, but this time Syra didn't run. She ran toward it. The nobles gasped. The Supreme Elder stood. Leon's eyes sharpened. At the last second, Syra leaped, twisting her body midair and plunging her dagger into the machine's control node. The construct froze, then it collapsed to the ground. Unmoving silence filled the hall. Zira stood over the defeated machine, breathing hard, sweat dripping down her back. Then from the sidelines, Lon spoke. His voice was calm, but there was something in it, something new. You passed the first test. The Supreme Elder looked displeased, the nobles whispered in disbelief, but CRA did not care. For the first time in her life, she felt alive, yet she knew this was only the beginning. The forbidden truth stood over the fallen training construct, her chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. The room was silent, the nobles, the Supreme Elder, the council, all watching with unreadable expressions. She had won. She had defied the expectations placed on her since birth, yet instead of pride, a strange feeling settled inside her. This was not victory, not yet. Leon Carter's gaze was still on her, calculating, measuring. She had passed his first test, but it was clear he was not finished with her. He stepped forward, his boots echoing against the cold stone floor. You learn fast, he said, voice steady, but fighting a machine is different from fighting a real enemy. Clenched her fists. What is the next test? Lean lips twitched, not quite a smile, but something close. He turned to the Supreme Elder. I will take her to the next challenge. It requires a different environment. The Supreme Elder's gaze darkened. The tests are to be held here, in Velmar's halls. Leon's expression remained neutral. The second test is not for show. If she is to stand beside me, she needs to think, not just fight. Your palace is not enough for that. A long silence, then reluctantly, the Supreme Elder nodded. Very well. Leon turned to come. He walked toward the exit. No guards, no formal procession, just an order. For a moment, CRA hesitated. She had never stepped outside Velmar's palace walls without an escort, without strict supervision. But now her choice was clear. She followed him. The journey to the Forbidden Archives. The hover transport glided smoothly over the city. Through the tinted windows, Thyra could see the spires of Velmar's capital stretching toward the sky, glowing under the twin moons. She had lived here her whole life, yet something about it felt different. Now smaller. Leon sat across from her, silent. He had not spoken since they left the palace. His expression was unreadable, but his posture was too controlled, too careful. Finally, Tyra broke the silence. Where are we going? Leon's gaze met hers. Somewhere your people don't want you to see. She frowned. What does that mean? He leaned forward slightly. Do you ever wonder why humans made this alliance in the first place? Thyra stiffened. It was to prevent war. Velmar leaders feared humanity's strength. Leon's blue eyes flickered with something, amusement, or maybe disappointment. That's what they told you. She frowned. That's the truth. Leon didn't argue. He just leaned back, staring out the window. Then let's see if you still believe that after this, the Forbidden Archives. The transport stopped in front of an ancient, crumbling structure at the edge of the city. Pyra's stomach twisted. She had seen this place before. The Forbidden Archives. Velmar history told of its importance, yet no one was allowed to enter. Even the mention of it was discouraged. This is restricted, she said, stepping out of the transport. Even I am not permitted inside. Leon walked ahead, unconcerned. You are now. The entrance was sealed by a biometric lock. Leon pulled out a small device, pressed it against the panel, and the door hissed open. Vira's breath caught. How Leon stepped inside, coming, hesitating only for a moment. She followed. The inside was dimly lit, filled with rows of ancient consoles and dust-covered databanks. The air smelled of age, of something forgotten. Leon led her to a console, activated it, and a holographic screen flickered to life. Words scrolled across in the Valmari language. Zur stepped closer and froze. Her name was on the screen. Princess Zyra. Designation selected. Offering her blood turned cold. She scrolled further, her fingers trembling. The document was centuries old. It did not just list her. There were dozens of names before hers. All female, all Velmar, all given to humans. Her stomach twisted. She turned to Leon. What is this? Leon's expression was grim. Your people lied to you, Princess. Zyra shook her head. No, the treaty began with my generation. Leon's jaw tightened. No, this goes back over 200 years, long before you were born, before even your parents were alive. She scrolled further. The records were clear. Velmar had not given one princess to humanity. They had given many. Where are they now? She whispered. Leon's voice was quiet but firm. That's what you should be asking. Your people's secrets of the past. Zyra stepped back, her mind spinning. Why would Velmar leaders lie? Why would they hide this? Leon crossed his arms. Because they weren't just making peace, they were hiding something. Zyra's breath hitched. Hiding what? Leon tapped the console again, bringing up another record. This one showed a genetic sequence, Zyra didn't understand at first until she saw. The comparison chart. Her DNA was displayed next to a human. They were almost identical. Her knees went weak. No, that's impossible. Leon exhaled. It's not. The Velmar have been experimenting for centuries, hiding the truth of what they are, what you are. Zyra shook her head. This is a lie. The Velmar are a proud race. We are not like humans. Leon's gaze darkened. Then why do you have human traits? Why do your people refuse to let you leave the planet? The Zyra's chest tightened. No, it can't be. Leon's voice was steady, but there was something almost gentle in it. You were never meant to be a bride, Terra. You were meant to be a secret. A chill ran down her spine. Her fate had never been about peace. It had been about control. And now she finally understood. The Velmar leaders did not fear humans. They feared her. The rebellion awakened. Cyrus stood frozen, staring at the glowing words on the ancient holographic screen. Her breath came in short gasps. The truth burned inside her mind, unraveling everything she had ever believed. She had never been chosen as a bride. She had been designed, a perfect experiment, a controlled creation, a genetic bridge between Gallery and humans. Her body trembled. She felt sick. Leon stood beside her, silent, letting her process the weight of what she had discovered. For centuries, Velmar leaders had not feared humans. They had used them. They had secretly altered their own people's DNA to be more compatible with humans, hiding the truth behind marriage alliances. And Zyra, she was just the latest in a long line of failed attempts. A chill ran down her spine. What happened to the others? Her fingers tightened into fists. She turned to Leon, her voice barely a whisper. What happened to them? Leon's expression darkened. They disappeared. Cyrus' heart pounded. Disappeared? Or were they erased? Leon didn't answer. He didn't have to. She knew the hidden chamber. Zyra had spent her life being trained, prepared, conditioned to accept her fate. But now the mask had fallen. She was not just a pawn. She was a prisoner, and she needed to escape. Leon must have seen the fire in her eyes, because he nodded once. There's more. Come with me. She followed him deeper into the forbidden archives. They moved quickly through the dusty halls, past ancient technology and decayed scrolls. At the end of the corridor stood a sealed door, one that looked far more modern than the rest of the ruins. This wasn't built by your ancestors, Leon muttered, running his gloved fingers over the smooth metallic surface. It's new. Your leaders have been hiding something here. Zyra felt a chill. If the Supreme Elder knew she was here, if he knew she had seen this, she would not leave alive. Leon placed a small hacking device against the door's access panel. The red warning light flickered. Security breach detected. A voice rang out over the intercom. Unauthorized entry detected. Security forces have been deployed. Zyra's stomach clenched. Leon cursed. They know we're here. We need to move. With a final click, the lock released. The door hissed open. Zyra stepped inside and gasped. The Forgotten Ones, rows of stasis pods, lined the dark chamber. Each one glowed faintly, casting into eerie blue light over the walls. Inside the pods, Velmar women. Vera staggered forward, pressing her hands against the glass of the nearest pod. The woman inside looked exactly like her. Same delicate features, same silver blue skin, same genetic markers. A cold horror filled her veins. They didn't disappear, she whispered. They were taken. Leon stood beside her, jaw clenched. These are the ones who came before you. Zyra swallowed hard. Why? What were they waiting for? A holographic display flickered to life beside the pod. CRA touched it, scrolling through the data. Test subjects 1 to 27. Terminated. Her breath hitched. Lon's expression darkened. They didn't just take them, they experimented on them. And when they weren't useful anymore, they erased them. Adora felt like the air had been sucked from the room. These women had trusted their leaders just as she had, and they had been betrayed. Her fists clenched. No more footsteps echoed from the entrance. A voice rang out. Princess CRA, step away from the chamber. The Supreme Elder's guards. Leon pulled his weapon, but Sarah did not move. She turned toward the entrance, her heart pounding with rage. How many more, Elder? She called out. How many of us have you taken? How many have you killed? The Supreme Elder stepped into the light, his expression cold, unshaken. You were never meant to see this child. His voice was calm, like he was still in control, like this was all a game. Zyra's hands trembled. She had spent her life obeying these people, listening to their rules, following their orders, and they had planned to dispose of her, just like the others. No, she whispered. Not anymore, the Supreme Elder sighed, as if disappointed, ashamed. You were supposed to be the perfect one, the first to finally succeed. He lifted a hand. The guards rushed forward. Leon grabbed his wrist. Run, escape, and rebellion. Zyra and Leon bolted down the corridors. The sound of energy blasts echoed behind them, striking the stone walls, sending debris falling around them. Leon returned fire, taking down 2 guards, but more poured into the tunnels they needed to get out. Now up ahead, the hallway split into 2 paths. Zyra's mind raced right back toward the palace, a trap left toward the lower city slums. She grabbed Leon's arm. This way they darted, left, plunging into the underground tunnels. The walls narrowed, and the air became thick with the scent of damp metal and rust. Zyra's mind raced. Where could they go? Who could they trust? Then she heard voices up ahead. A group of Velmar rebels emerged from the shadows. Their leader, a tall woman with cybernetic implants, stared at Zyra with wide eyes. The princess, she whispered. You're alive. Zyra's breath hitched. You know me? The woman nodded. We've been waiting for you. Leon frowned. What do you mean? The rebel leader expression hardened. Because we are the ones who were supposed to rescue you. The great escape. Kaz Iris stood frozen, her breath shallow as she stared at the group of Velmar rebels. Before her, the woman at the front, her cybernetic eyes glowing faintly in the dim light, studied Zyra like she was something more than a princess. She was a symbol, a spark. You were supposed to be dead, the rebel leader said, her voice steady but filled with something dangerous. Hope. Zyra's pulse pounded. The Supreme Elder wanted it that way. A low murmur rippled through the rebels. Some looked furious, others fearful. They had been fighting in the dark, not knowing the truth until now. Leon shifted beside Zyra, his gun still drawn, his stance cautious. We don't have time for speeches. The entire Velmar security force is after us. The rebel leader nodded. We know, that's why we're here. Zyra frowned. You were waiting for me? The leader gave a sharp nod. We've been waiting for years, but we were never strong enough to reach you inside the palace. She stepped closer. Until now. Zyra's heart pounded. They had been trying to save her. She had spent her whole life believing obedience was her duty, that she was born to fulfill a treaty of peace. But these rebels have been trying to set her free, and now, standing among them, she realized something terrifying. She had never truly lived until this moment. Leon glanced at her. You trust them? Zyra met his gaze. He wasn't just asking if they could rely on these rebels. He was asking something deeper. Was she ready to fight? Zyra took a breath. Then she turned to the rebels. I trust that we all want the same thing. And right now I want to burn the Supreme Elder's rule to the ground. The rebel leader grinned. Then Leighton, get you out of here, princess. Hunted like prey, the underground tunnels beneath the Valmari capital were ancient, built long before the Supreme Elder's rule. The rebels had mapped them, used them for smuggling weapons and people in and out of the city. But now, as they ran through the narrow corridors, the sound of footsteps and energy rifles echoed behind them. The Supreme Elder had sent his best. The leak guards. Zyra's lungs burned as she sprinted beside Lon, her mind racing. The rebels ahead of them moved swiftly, leading the way through the mosaic tunnels. The exit is ahead, one of the rebels called. Then boom, an explosion or it through the tunnel ahead, sending divas flying. The shockwave knocked Zyra off her feet. Dust and smoke filled the air. Leon pulled her up quickly, his grip strong. They're sealing off the escape routes, a rebel cursed. They knew we'd come this way. Zyra's mind raced. Think Kyra, think the Supreme Elder had spent years planning for control, but not for rebellion. She turned sharply. There's another way out. The rebel leader frowned where Zyra's hands were still shaking, but she forced her mind to focus. She had read old maps in the palace archives. The tunnels weren't just for movement. They had once led to Velmar's Undercity, a place long forgotten, a hidden sector. She said quickly, beneath the capital. Before the city was built over it, the elders buried it. But the tunnel should still be there. The rebel leader hesitated. If you're wrong, I'm not. Zyra cut in. Do you want to die here, or do you want to take a chance? Leon smirked. I like her thinking. The rebel leader sighed. Fine, lead the way, princess. The buried city, the path down to the forgotten Undercity, was steep and crumbling. It had been since anyone had walked these halls. Dust and shadows coated everything, and the air was stale, thick with the scent of time and decay. "Are you sure about this?" Leon asked, as they moved through the darkness. Zyra wasn't sure, but she had to be. Yes. She lied. The rebels spread out their weapons ready. The lights on their rifles cast eerie shadows against the stone walls. Ancient structures still stood half buried in the rock. This place had been a city once, but now it was a grave. A deep sense of unease settled over them. Then a rebel at the front whispered, "Something's wrong." Leon's expression darkened. "I know it's too." Quiet then. A sound, a mechanical hum. Virus's blood ran cold. Run the walls. Exploded from the darkness. Machines emerged, not human, not Delmary. Something worse. Kill units. The Supreme Elder's last line of defense. Cold, unfeeling metal, designed to hunt, designed to kill. The rebels opened fire, but the machines did not slow. Leon grabbed Syra's arm. "We have to move now." She ran, her heart slamming against her ribs. The UND city was collapsing, the weight of centuries crashing down. The exit loomed ahead, a broken transport shaft leading to the surface. A rebel shouted, "They're blocking the path." Zyra gritted her teeth. "No, not now, not when they were so close." Then she saw it, a manual override, a power conduit still connected to the surface systems. She sprinted for it, ignoring Leon's yell to stop. The machines turned toward her. Zyra slammed her hand onto the control panel. The system flickered, then came to life. A massive shockwave pulsed through the tunnels, frying the machines where they stood. Leon naked, Zyra back, just as the ground beneath them collapsed. And then light. The rebels stumbled onto the surface, gasping for breath. They were free for now. The next step. Warzius stood on the rocky terrain outside the city, staring up at the capital. Smoke curled into the sky. They had escaped, but the war had only just begun. She turned to the rebels. "You wanted a leader." Her voice was steady now, her hands no longer shaking. "Then let's make the Supreme Elder regret everything he's done." The rebel leader smirked. "Now that's the princess we've been waiting for." Leon exhaled beside her. "We just declared war." Zyra met his gaze, fire burning in her chest. "No, they declared war the moment they tried to erase us. The rebellion had begun, and this time Tyra would not run. She would fight war and betrayal." Zyra stood on the high ridge overlooking the Velmar capital, the wind whipping through her hair. Smoke curled into the sky. Fires still smoldering from the rebels' escape. The Supreme Elder would not let this go unanswered. He would hunt her. He would hunt all of them, and she was ready. Lon stepped up beside her, his expression hard. "They'll send everything they have to crush this rebellion." Zyra's jaw tightened. "Then we strike first." The rebels behind them murmured in agreement. The underground resistance had waited for years, but they had never had a reason to believe victory was possible. Now they did. The Supreme Elder had created her. He had tried to control her just like the ones before her, but he had made a mistake. She was still alive, and she would burn his empire to the ground. The enemy's response. The Supreme Elder stood in the towering command citadel,